Welcome to the Luna Syncrasy podcast, where we honor our cycles and the magic of the moon.
We have been talking about starting this podcast for 6 months now, but we are finally doing it. And it's the perfect time because it's now new moon in Aries, and that is the first day of the astrological year.
And because we're both astrologers, we are in love with the timing of the release of this podcast because March 20th, 2023 is the official start of spring. It's the spring equinox. And just a day later, on March 21st, 2023, I believe at 12:23 Central Time, it is the new moon in Aries. The way that this aligned and the synchronicity of the start of a podcast that was kind of born from the concept and the idea of aligning with the moon and the cycles of our lives just feels so perfect.
So we kind of wanted to talk a little bit about the significance of the new moon and the full moon, because that is when we're going to be releasing these episodes about every 2 weeks or so.
When you align your life with the cycles of the moon, some really cool things can happen. The new moon is when the sun and the moon meet up in the sky together. So the moon is dark. We can't see it. It is like a literal blank slate in the sky. So it's a really good time to set intentions, to plant seeds, to get really clear. The full moon is obviously when the moon is at its fullest and when it's shining bright. I'm guessing most of us have had experience with the full moon and how it can affect us as humans, but it's like it's shining a light on the things that we maybe need to shift or reorganize in our life. And it's also a time of completion. It's also a time of letting go.
Usually at this time, something is going to be shown to you, something about that intention, something like, here's the path that you need to take, or this little piece of information that you've kind of overlooked is important and it's going to help you manifest the goal that you want. And then after the full moon, the moon starts getting small again, smaller and smaller until it's another new moon. And during that time, you're kind of closing everything up for that one cycle. What's really cool about this is it totally lines up with the seasons. So spring comes, things are building. In the summer, everything's full, like, let's go, let's go. And then in the fall, we have our harvest and things start closing up. And then in the winter, we're quiet like that. So that would be the new moon. And the same thing with our menstrual cycle.
This sort of spring follicular phase where new ideas, it's got a new moon energy. And then as the moon gets full, it reflects summer or our ovulation phase in our cycle. As it starts to get smaller and become the waning moon, it represents the luteal phase of our cycle. And we're wrapping things up where we might be irritable or a little more agitated because it's this nesting energy. It's like this period of wanting to wrap things up and get things done and get things in the right place because we know our menstrual cycle is coming. And that is our time to go inward again. And that would be back to that midnight winter season. There really is a cycle for everything. And the way that so many facets of our lives, especially as women, aligns with the moon and what it does. I mean, it's almost as if it's just a mirror, and it feels very powerful when you connect to it. Even our 24-hour day cycle mirrors the moon.
But because of all of these cycles, how the moon is really overlying our lives, that's where we got the name Luna Syncrasy. So we can sync our lives to the moon, but then there's also this little play on words with synchronicities. And so there's the synchronicity of the moon. And so that's how we got Luna Syncrasy.
It's a really fun play on words, I think.
Even if it is a made up word, it's okay.
We're allowed to make up words when we start our own podcast.
It's just really cool because the moon totally does encompass all of these cycles of our lives and like just energy fluctuations through the year, through the month, through everything.
Yeah. And I love that we're starting it. It just like feels like such a fresh new beginning, not just for our podcast, but just for all of us in general. Like it's like the true new year, not the one that we try to celebrate January 1. This just feels like such a cool, new and exciting time to start anything, really.
I think maybe it would be good. We haven't even said our names yet. Who's who? What are we doing here?
Who are we really? We should introduce ourselves. The two of us actually met through our astrologer training program and have been connecting ever since on a wide range of topics. My name is Cassie. My professional background was originally early childhood special education. I spent close to 2 decades working in that field. I taught child development courses at the college level for a long time. And in a career pivot, I left the field of education and now a full-time astrologer. In terms of astrology, I am a Cancer sun, a Libra moon, and a Taurus rising. I also have a pretty solid amount of Libra in my chart, which I see as being a big part of why I live for relationships and connections and understanding the people in my life and helping other people make connections and understand one another through relationships of all kinds. I also love creativity and making environments and spaces feel good. I love all things conscious living and learning. And I am the person who is constantly taking in more information and finding ways to apply it and share it.
And I'm Ruth. I am a Gemini sun, a Cancer moon, and a Virgo rising. My background is in engineering and I work with data in a hospital. So I am like really analytical, type A, like love the science, love to know how things work. And so it's actually really funny to me that like I'm now really into astrology. And I think the people around me are kind of confused by it because it's totally the other side of what I am typically doing. It makes so much logical sense to me too. Like, oh, this is why we're doing it this way. That like you can look at somebody's chart and just like completely understand them. And my logical brain just loves to analyze that.
I love it.
Yeah. Like in my chart too, you can see it. I have a ton of Mercury energy, like even the Gemini Virgo. I know maybe 2 or 3 other people who have Gemini and Virgo in their big three, which is your sun, moon, rising. And we're all like high anxiety, overthinking everything. And it's just like it's a natural thing for Gemini Virgos because that Mercury mind is just always going there. And I want to know how everything works all the time.
All of that Gemini and Virgo that you have in your chart is so significant and so spot on because Mercury rules both of those signs. And in astrology, Mercury is the planet that rules the mind. So all of these aspects of being really analytical and having a really strong, powerful mind is just one example of the way that astrology shows up. And it really highlights your gifts.
And as opposed to Cassie, who is the extrovert, I'm definitely a little bit more introverted. I like my time alone, but I also love to talk about this kind of stuff.
We learned astrology together, and it was like a year later when I was like, Ruth, I literally just realized that a square is a thing in astrology that has to do with, it creates kind of challenge or friction in your chart. So it's something we look for as astrologers. And it just occurred to me like a whole year later that it's called a square because it literally makes a square. Like I just focused on how it felt or like what it might look like in a person. And Ruth was like, obviously, Cassie, it's a square because it makes a square. Like,
I
just
mean,
to
it's
give you
yeah,
an
so it's
example.
90-degree angles. I see the geometry. It's really funny how the two of us look at these charts completely differently, but we still get to the same place.
Yeah, it's super cool.
We are both manifesting generators. And so we're really good at keeping up with each other. The way my mind works, it can go over here and then immediately jump to the other side. And Cassie can kind of follow me and just like ignore the complete like 180 that my mind does sometimes.
Yeah, we can keep on pace. And that will be like our work to do on this podcast is to not go all over the place. Human design will definitely be an upcoming topic though, because it's something we've both found a lot of interest in. And it's fun to find the similarities between human design and astrology as well.
And I think we'll also throw in some other topics. So we're both really interested in health, increasing our energy and feeling good. Also, just some more esoteric things like numerology and human design, tarot, the Enneagram, things like that. It's just going to be like fun topics that we're going to deep dive into more.
And it gives us a lot of variety because I think that's a big part of what we find in common too, which aligns with being manifesting generators, is just being able to talk about a wide range of topics. And we both like to really go deep into trying to understand and to discuss in dialogue about a lot of different things.
Yeah. And it's not just mine too. Like we both have a lot of Cancer in our chart. And so the Cancer is all about like deep feelings and like really relating to people. And we both are obsessed with being mothers. And like we also have like these Cancer things
the human emotional stuff.
So what you can expect from us on a bi-weekly basis is the first half of each podcast being sort of a deep dive into one of these topics, whether it's further into astrology or human design, the Enneagram, numerology, the cycles of our lives. There's an educator archetype in each of us, and we each have different ways that we like to share and discuss. Being able to share that with all of you is a big part of what motivated us to start this podcast in the first place. The second half you can expect to be relevant to what's happening in the current sky. Whether it's the new moon or the full moon, we will be talking about it and highlighting it for you so that you can kind of frame your life around the cycles of the moon in the way that we have learned to. And we hope it's really helpful.
Do we talk about this new moon in Aries?
Yes. And this feels like a significant new moon in Aries because something that doesn't happen very often is happening with this new moon in Aries. Well, what is happening is that we will have 2 new moons in Aries. And we kind of touched on the fact that Aries is the very first sign of the zodiac. It's the official start of the astrological new year. It's also happening one day after the first day of spring. And something that happens every 2.5 years, so not very often, is that we have a new moon in the same sign back to back. So we'll have a new moon in Aries this month in March, and we'll have another one in April. So to me, that feels very much like this is a moon to really kind of get clear about what you want, like what seeds do you want to plant? And we kind of get to do it twice. So it just feels really emphasized to me.
Yeah, and it's just like a brand new beginning. Really is just like a brand new feeling, a brand new energy. So Aries is a fire sign, which is going to give us a spark. It's going to give us a lot of energy. Whereas in the past month, before this new moon, we were in Pisces season, which is a water cycle. And so everything is going to be felt a lot more deeply. And now this new fire is going to bring us out of that and give us more energy to get things done that we want to do.
The other aspect of this new moon that I think is worth noting is that in astrology, each sign there are 29 degrees. And so this new moon is happening at 0 degrees. And the way a new moon works is the moon and the sun meet up together. And so the moon and the sun are meeting up at 0 degrees, like the earliest possible point. It's like they're walking into Aries season and they're walking into spring together. So that kind of just going back to it, that energy just feels really potent. I just keep getting this visual in my head of like the moon and the sun holding hands, like walking into spring. Like can't get it out of my head. But that is a pretty cool thing to think about. And it just feels like a powerful thing. Like Ruth said, what seeds are you planting? It's a really good thing to get clear on.
It's interesting because it really is. I love that visual of them just like walking into spring together because it doesn't normally happen like this. Like we don't always have it on that very first day. I mean, I think we probably very rarely have it on that very first day. And so this is just it's a very potent day for us. Like everything is just starting new and it's going to be a totally new energy. Maybe you haven't felt like doing the things that you decided you were going to do for the new year. Maybe your New Year's resolutions are already out the door. We can bring those back. This energy is all here for us right now.
And I love this is kind of one of the ways that astrology and the moon cycle shows up in like a literal sense. Like it's spring. We literally plant new seeds. Things start to come back to life, like just like we do as humans. And I just love that connection to nature that we sometimes can forget about.
Thinking about Aries too. So if we're going to be planting these new seeds, having this energy, like it makes a lot of sense because the Aries sign. So like if you are an Aries, if like your sun sign, moon sign, rising, if you have a lot of Aries in your chart, like you're probably somebody who's extroverted, you are an initiator, somebody who likes to get things done, you want to get things started, you are fearless, you can just get things, you can do them.
I think of Aries, I think of just passionate powerhouse energy. It's like there's a deep fire within every Aries that gives them this enthusiasm and an initiation to do things quickly. The ability to not let anything hold you back inspires a lot of people. And that fire that's within you is something that brings light and warmth to this world. It's just, there's such a energy to an Aries. And I think they inspire us in a lot of ways.
And so like that is the energy that we're all going to be feeling for the next month. And those are like the types of intentions that you can be setting for this new moon. What do you want to get done? What do you want to do?
It is a really good time to get clear on your purpose and maybe even put yourself first. What feels aligned for you? What is it that feels like a priority? What is your passion? What lights you up? How can you take charge of your life as we head into this brand new season with a brand new moon? One of the other things that I was thinking about when you're talking about Aries, just as a sign, is there's a tendency for like impatience. I always think it's like nice to kind of have these things in the back of your mind. Like, yeah, people are going to have that energy to start and to do things, but they also might be like a little more impatient or more easily irritated. I always see this in my kids sometimes. It's just like, oh, this is the energy. This is why people are maybe a little more heightened sometimes.
Makes sense, because with Aries being the ram, like they just want to move forward, and like anything that gets in your way is just like, oh my gosh, can we just like stop that already?
Totally.
So yeah, we might be feeling a lot of that.
The high road of it is, and the high road of it is that Aries people tend to do well under pressure, and they can trudge forward, and they cannot let things stand in their way
because they want to get it done.
This is a really good time to take ownership of your life. Be courageous, communicate what you want, share your gifts, embrace this new beginning, and focus on what you're most passionate about and decide where you can take action from there. And don't just think about taking action. This is the take action moment. This is where we go. What's so beautiful about this new moon in Aries and the sign of Aries is that we don't have to worry about getting everything perfect. The hardest thing to do is to simply start. That's the first step. It's always the most challenging, and the energy is really supportive of you starting something, whatever that may be, whatever feels most significant for you, whether it's a new habit or a big dream. This is the perfect new moon, especially over the next couple of days, to just really go all in. I gotta say, let us be your example. Our very first episode, the epitome of the perfectly imperfect podcast. I know I'm happy we did it. Can't wait to share more.
Thanks for tuning in to our first Luna Syncrasy podcast. We will be back in a couple of weeks for the full moon in Libra. And if there are topics that you are interested in hearing about or learning more about, let us know.
We want to know, what seeds are you planting? What are you going to be doing this season? We would love to hear from you guys. So in the show notes, we'll have a link to our email address, how you can get a hold of us.
And how do we wrap up a podcast?
How do we wrap up a podcast?
I don't know.
Thanks for listening.
Happy new moon in Aries.